The room was a tomb of shadows. Zyro lay flat on his mattress, the only movement coming from the rhythmic flick of his thumb against the glass screen. Outside, the world had long since gone quiet, leaving him alone with the hum of the city and the static of his own thoughts. The blue light from the smartphone bled across his features, carving sharp lines into his face and reflecting in his eyes. He did not blink. He scrolled through the feed, his gaze sliding over images and text without truly seeing them. His breathing was shallow, matching the steady, mechanical pace of his scrolling. He shifted his weight, the mattress springs groaning under him, a sharp sound that cut through the stillness. He adjusted his grip, his knuckles turning white as he pressed the device closer to his face. The air in the room felt stagnant, heavy with the weight of hours spent in the dark. He reached out with his free hand, brushing the surface of the screen to clear a notification, but his attention remained locked on the endless stream of content. He paused. His thumb hovered midair, frozen above the glass, as a new banner pushed its way to the top of the feed. The banner pulsed with a neon intensity that seemed to vibrate against the dark backdrop of the feed. It read, "Earn $500 in 1 day." The words were bold, demanding, and impossible to ignore. Zyro felt a sudden, sharp jolt in his chest, as if a wire had been pulled taut. He stopped scrolling. The air in the room suddenly felt thin. He stared at the flashing text, his eyes widening as the promise of quick wealth settled into his mind. The silence of the apartment was no longer empty. It was filled with the sudden, frantic rhythm of his own heart. He pushed himself upright, his spine snapping into a rigid line. The mattress springs shrieked under the sudden shift in weight, but he did not notice. His pulse hammered against his ribs, a steady, insistent thrum that echoed in his ears. He leaned forward, his face inches from the glass, his breath hitching in his throat. The offer was right there, waiting. It felt like a lifeline thrown into a dark sea. He tightened his grip on the phone, his thumb trembling as he prepared to engage. The temptation was a physical weight, pulling him toward the screen, demanding his total, undivided attention. He did not hesitate. He moved his finger toward the glowing promise, his movements sharp and decisive. His fingertip made contact with the glass. The screen flickered, the feed vanished, and a new window expanded to fill his entire field of vision. The website was a stark, aggressive contrast to the shadows of his room. It was a landscape of vibrant, high-contrast colors, electric yellows and deep, warning reds that seemed to pulse with an artificial life of their own. Zyro blinked, his eyes struggling to adjust to the sudden surge of brightness. The page was cluttered with urgent prompts and bold, oversized text that demanded immediate action. In the center of the display, a digital clock appeared. It began a countdown from 5 minutes, the numbers ticking down with a mechanical, relentless precision. Each second that vanished from the display felt like a physical weight, pressing against his chest. His breathing grew shallow, the rhythm of his lungs quickening to match the rapid pace of the clock. The air in his room felt suddenly thin, as if the device were drawing the oxygen out of the space. He leaned closer, his face illuminated by the harsh, flickering glare of the countdown. The pressure was no longer just a promise, it was a ticking deadline. He stared at the numbers, his jaw set, his focus narrowing down. The countdown clock ticked down, the red digits shrinking with every passing second. Zyro felt the heat of the screen against his skin, a dry, artificial warmth that made his palms slick. He shifted his weight, his legs tangled in the sheets, and reached for the leather wallet, resting on his bedside table. His fingers fumbled with the clasp, the metal snap echoing sharply in the quiet room. He pulled out the card, the plastic edge biting into his thumb as he held it steady. His hands were shaking, a fine tremor that made the card rattle. Against the phone screen, he looked back at the website, the input fields glowing with a demand for his information. He began to type, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. Each digit he entered felt like a stone dropped into a deep well. He paused, his finger hovering over the final sequence, his breath held tight in his lungs. The timer hit the 60-second mark, the numbers flashing a warning. He did not look at the clock again. He finished the entry, his eyes locked on the button labeled Confirm. He pressed it, his thumb pushing down with enough force to make the screen flex. He waited, his pulse thudding in his fingertips. The screen went white, then gray, then back to the vibrant interface. A loading bar crawled across the bottom, moving with agonizing slowness. Zyro watched the progress, his muscles coiled tight, his eyes unblinking. The cursor spun in a rhythmic circle, a tiny hypnotic loop that seemed to mock his impatience. Then, the silence broke. A sharp, melodic chime rang out from the phone speaker, clear and resonant in the dark room. A new notification box slid into view, expanding to fill the center of the screen. In bold green text, it read, "Congratulations, you earned $50. Zyro felt a jolt of electricity race up his spine. He let out a breath he had been holding for minutes, his shoulders dropping from his ears. A wide, jagged grin spread across his face, his teeth bared in the dim light. He tapped the screen again, his fingers now steady, his movements fluid and confident. He felt the weight of the room lift. The fear that had gripped him seconds ago vanished, replaced by a surge of adrenaline. He looked at the balance indicator, now showing the small increase. To him, it was not just money, it was proof. He had cracked the code. The $50 sat on the screen, a digital beacon that anchored his focus. Zyro leaned forward, his chest pressing against the edge of the mattress. He did not blink. The blue light from the phone washed over his features, carving sharp shadows into his skin. He tapped the screen again, his thumb moving with a rhythmic, mechanical precision. Each interaction felt like a physical connection to a hidden vault. He was no longer just watching. He was participating in a process he believed he had mastered. His breathing grew shallow, short bursts of air. He shifted his knees, digging them into the bedding, his entire body angled toward the small, glowing rectangle. The room around him ceased to exist. There was only the feedback loop, the chime, and the promise of the next payout. He felt a strange, humming intensity in his veins. He reached out, his hand hovering over the interface, his fingers twitching with anticipation. He was locked in, his senses narrowed down. He only saw the next button, the next potential gain, and the growing hunger to see the balance climb higher, faster, and without end. Zyro tapped the withdraw button with a firm, decisive motion. He expected the bank notification to follow instantly, a digital confirmation of his success. Instead, the screen flickered. A new window snapped into place, blocking the balance display. It was a stark, red-bordered box that demanded attention. Upgrade to withdraw flashed in the center, accompanied by a countdown timer that began ticking away from 60 seconds. Zyro froze. His thumb hovered midair. He blinked, reading the text once, then twice, searching for a hidden link or a mistake. The vibrant interface now seemed aggressive, the colors sharper and more demanding. He shifted his weight, the mattress springs groaning under him, but he did not pull away. A cold prickle of uncertainty crawled up his neck. The logic of the system had been simple. Work, earn, collect. This new requirement was a jarring deviation. He looked at the timer, the numbers dropping steadily. He felt his pulse jump, no longer with the rhythm of victory, but with the erratic beat of sudden, sharp anxiety. He stared at the upgrade button. The room felt suddenly vast and empty. He was caught in a moment of absolute stillness, his finger trembling as he weighed the cost of the next step. He pressed the button, the payment processed with a hollow, digital thud. Zyro watched his bank balance drop, but the withdrawal window remained locked. A new prompt materialized instantly. Verify account to unlock funds. The text was bold, demanding, and left no room for debate. He did not hesitate this time. The logic of the trap had taken hold. He had already invested too much to stop. He typed his credentials again, his fingers stiff and clumsy against the glass. The screen light seemed to dim, casting long, distorted shadows across the walls. He felt a sudden, sharp draft move through the room. Though the windows were shut tight, the air grew thin, biting at his skin. He hit confirm for the third time. The chime that followed was distorted, a low, metallic groan that resonated in his chest. He leaned into the glow, his eyes burning, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. He was chasing a ghost, pouring his resources into a void. He ignored the mounting dread. His focus narrowed to the flickering interface. He was trapped in a cycle of his own making. Zyro hovered over the final prompt, his finger hovering just above the screen. He was ready to pay the verification fee, his mind already calculating the return. He tapped the button. The screen did not chime. Instead, it froze. The vibrant colors of the interface began to bleed into static, the pixels tearing across the display in jagged, unnatural lines. He shook the device, a sharp, frantic motion, but the image only distorted further. The light from the screen pulsed once, twice, and then died completely. Total darkness flooded the room. He sat motionless, his eyes straining against the sudden absence of light. A second later, a single sterile white glow cut through the gloom. A message appeared in the center of the display. 404 error. He tapped the screen, swiped, and pressed the power button, but the device remained unresponsive. He refreshed the page, but the browser returned only the same cold white void. The progress bars, the account balance, the countdown timers, everything he had spent the last hour chasing had been wiped clean. He stared at the blank, unyielding surface. Zyro did not move. He sat on the edge of the mattress, his back rigid, his hands resting on his knees like heavy stones. The phone remained in his grip, a dead weight of glass and metal that no longer offered even the comfort of a glow. The silence in the room was absolute, pressing against his eardrums until he could hear the rhythmic, shallow pulse of his own heart. He stared at the black screen, waiting for a flicker, a notification, anything to suggest the world he had just inhabited still existed. Nothing came. Minutes bled into an hour. His muscles began to ache from the unnatural stillness, but he lacked the will to shift his weight. He watched the shadows in the corners of the room, tracking their slow retreat as the night began to thin. The darkness shifted from deep charcoal to a bruised, sickly gray. Outside, the world stayed quiet, indifferent to the void that had opened in his life. He kept his gaze locked on the unresponsive device, his eyes dry and burning. Slowly, the first sliver of dawn pushed through the curtains. It was a harsh, pale light that crept across the floorboards, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Zyro finally stood. His legs felt stiff, his movements mechanical as he navigated the small space of his room. He did not look back at the bed or the device that had betrayed him. He stepped out into the morning air, the cool breeze biting at his skin, but he barely registered the temperature. The streets were waking up, people moving with purpose, their lives continuing while his own felt suspended in a state of sudden, sharp failure. He walked with his head bowed, his eyes fixed on the pavement, watching his own feet move forward without intent. Every step felt heavier than the last. He reached the porch of his friend's house and stopped. He stared at the wood grain of the door for a long moment, his hand hovering over the bell. He could turn back, but the memory of the empty bank account pushed him forward. He pressed the bell. The door opened. The friend gestured toward a chair, but Zyro remained standing, his hands gripping the back of a wooden seat until his knuckles turned white. He spoke in a low, fractured cadence, detailing the sequence of payments, the false promises, and the final, mocking error code. He did not look for pity. He only needed to say it aloud to make it real. The friend listened, leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. As Zyro finished, the silence in the room was not empty like his own. It was heavy with judgment and clarity. The friend sighed, a sharp sound that cut through the lingering tension. Zyro, listen to me. Easy money is never real. The words hung in the air, blunt and unvarnished. They hit with the force of a physical blow. Zyro felt the heat rise in his chest, a mix of shame and the sudden, stinging sting of realization. He looked at the floor, his shoulders slumping as the finality of the statement took root. He nodded slowly, once, then twice. He simply stood there, finally understanding that the path he had chosen was a dead end. The walk back home felt different. The weight of the morning had shifted from a burden into a cold, sharp clarity. Zyro entered his room, the air still thick with the memory of the night before. He did not look at the smartphone lying on his bed. He moved directly to his desk, his movements deliberate and devoid of the frantic energy that had consumed him weeks ago. He reached for his laptop, his fingers steady as he pressed the power button. The fan hummed to life, a low, rhythmic sound that filled the quiet room. As the operating system loaded, he did not open the browser. He did not check his email. Instead, he navigated to the Applications folder and double-clicked a heavy, complex video editing program. The icon pulsed on the screen, a promise of a different kind of labor. He watched the progress bar crawl across the display, his eyes locked on the screen. The interface finally bloomed, a complex grid of timelines and tools waiting for his input. He sat back, took a deep breath, and placed his hands on the keyboard. The transformation had begun. The first week was a war against the interface. Zyro stared at the monitor until his eyes burned, mapping every shortcut and tool. He kept a notebook open beside the laptop, filling page after page with diagrams of the timeline and color grading nodes. His hand cramped, the skin over his knuckles stiffening from hours of gripping the pen. But he did not stop. He broke every action down to the individual frame, watching tutorials until the logic of the software became second nature. He repeated simple transitions dozens of times, refining the motion until it felt fluid. When the program crashed, he did not panic. He simply rebooted and picked up exactly where he left off. The room became a sanctuary of focused, repetitive labor. He ignored the clock, measuring time only by the progress of his edits. Every night, he pushed his limits, testing the boundaries of what the software could do. The initial frustration faded, replaced by the steady, rhythmic clicking of the mouse and the hum of the cooling fan. He was building a foundation, one frame at a time. The nights stretched long, but they no longer felt empty. Zyro traded the comfort of sleep for the relentless pursuit of technical proficiency. He pushed his chair back, the wheels scraping against the floor, and adjusted the brightness of his monitor to match the deep shadows of the room. The blue light that once signaled a trap now served as a focused spotlight for his craft. He spent hours balancing color palettes and syncing audio tracks, his eyes scanning the waveform for the slightest imperfection. When exhaustion pulled at his eyelids, he stood up, paced the length of the room, and drank cold water before returning to the desk. He was no longer waiting for a payout, he was waiting for the render to finish. He experimented with lighting effects, watching how a single adjustment changed the mood of the entire scene. He deleted entire sequences, rebuilt them from scratch, and learned to value the process of iteration over the speed of the result. His fingers moved across the keys with newfound confidence, mapping commands without looking down. The screen was no longer a window into someone else's promise of easy money. It was a canvas. He worked until the first gray light of dawn touched the window. Months of silence and repetition finally yielded a tangible result. Zyro sat at his desk, the room quiet, his focus directed entirely at the monitor. He opened the analytics dashboard, watching as the data populated the screen. A line graph stretched across the display, climbing steadily from left to right. It was not a promise of instant wealth, but a record of consistent, daily output. He traced the curve with his finger, noting the correlation between his late-night sessions and the rise in engagement. The numbers were small, but they were real. They represented hours of editing, hundreds of discarded drafts, and the slow refinement of his technical skills. He looked back at his early notes, comparing the complexity of his first projects to the polished, streamlined work he produced today. The difference was stark. Where he once sought a shortcut to bypass the rules of the world, he now understood that the rules were the foundation of his progress. He refreshed the page. The graph ticked upward again, a silent verification of the value he had built with his own hands. He leaned back, the chair spring silent, and watched the trend line hold its course. The screen displayed the objective evidence of his labor, a steady climb. Zyro stood up and moved the desk lamp to the side, casting a soft, even light across his workspace. He reached for the camera mounted on its tripod, gripping the frame with steady hands to lock it into place. He checked the focus ring, turning it slowly until his own reflection in the monitor was sharp and clear. He cleared the desktop of stray papers, leaving only the microphone and the clean, organized space he had cultivated. He sat down, the chair settling into the floorboards without a sound. He took a long, slow breath, feeling the air fill his lungs and steadying his posture. He looked at the small, glowing red light on the camera, acknowledging the weight of what he was about to record. He adjusted his position, shifting his weight until he was perfectly centered in the frame. He did not rush, he did not fidget. He checked the audio levels on the screen. watching the green bars dance in response to his quiet breathing. Everything was ready. Zyro pressed the record button. The red light blinked, a steady pulse in the quiet room. He did not look away. He leaned forward, his hands resting flat on the desk surface, and began to speak. "I spent months chasing a promise that didn't exist," he said, his voice level and devoid of hesitation. "I looked for a shortcut, a way to bypass the work, and I paid for that mistake with everything I had." He paused, letting the silence hang in the air between him and the lens. He looked at his own image on the monitor, seeing the change in his posture, the lack of the frantic, darting eyes that had defined his past. He turned his focus back to the camera. If something feels too easy, if it promises you the world without asking for your time or your effort, it is inevitably wrong. There is no secret code. There is no hidden path to success that doesn't require you to build it yourself, piece by piece, day after day. Zyro leaned back, his posture relaxed but alert. "Real success," he continued, his voice steady and resonant, "comes only from hard work." He allowed the statement to hang in the silence of the room. There was no flicker of doubt in his eyes, no trace of the urgency that once consumed him. He watched the red recording light, a small, constant beacon of his own creation. He did not look for a reaction. He did not check for a notification. He simply sat there, fully present in the work he had finished. The screen glowed with the steady graph of his progress, a testament to months of disciplined effort. He held his position, his face a portrait of calm resolve. Slowly, the light on the camera dimmed. The screen began to darken, the edges pulling inward, until only his focused expression remained in the frame. Then, the image faded into total blackness. The room remained quiet, the air still.